Hi, Imora. On my 33rd birthday, I got a text from my mother that said, "We sold your car. Your sister needed a new phone. Be grateful, no happy birthday, no explanation, just gone." But that was only the beginning. What would you do if you found out your own family forged your name on bank loans, drained your savings, erased you from family photos, and rewrote a will to give your inheritance to someone else? And worse, what if they made you feel like you were the problem the whole time? Would you fight back? Or would you let them keep writing your story for you? Tacoma never tries to be beautiful, it simply is. The gray, the mist, the cold it settles into you like a second skin. That afternoon, I drove home from the hospital in silence, windshield wipers cutting across a steady drizzle that had no intention of stopping. My 33rd birthday. I wasn't expecting streamers or balloons, but I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would remember. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly as it always did. No extra cars, no porch light left on for a surprise. That was fine. I had a bottle of white chilling in the fridge and a leftover lasagna slice waiting. Quiet was something I'd learned to live with. Inside, I peeled off my hospital badge and scrubs, dropped them on the bathroom floor, and stepped into sweats. My phone buzzed as I was tying my hair into a loose knot. A message from Mom. "Sold your car. Callista needed a new phone. Be grateful we still feed you." The air left my lungs. I blinked, certain it was a mistake. Another message came through before I could respond. "You're being dramatic. It's just a car." My knees gave slightly, but I steadied myself on the bathroom counter. Then I moved fast. Out the front door, barefoot, the concrete wet under my feet. The driveway? Empty. My car? Gone. The Civic I bought after 2 years of double shifts, paid off in full 6 months ago. Gone. I stepped back inside. The living room was warm, smelled faintly of toasted bread. Veramy mother sat at the kitchen island, legs crossed, scrolling through her iPad, like she hadn't just detonated a bomb through text. "Where's my car?" I asked. She didn't look up. "You didn't really need it, did you? You worked 10 minutes away." "I needed it because it was mine." She laughed, like it said something funny. "Don't be so selfish. Your sister's got that sponsorship thing in LA. She needs to look the part." I didn't answer. I knew if I stayed, I'd say something I couldn't unsay. I walked past her and upstairs, shutting the door behind me. Dinner was silent. I sat alone at the table, stabbing at a microwaved plate of whatever was left in the fridge. No cake, no card. No one even said happy birthday. Callista, my younger sister, was in Palm Springs for a content shoot. She posted 3 outfit changes before noon and a photo of the new phone with a glittering caption, "Blessed, thank you, fam." I guess I was fam. Halfway through dinner, Vera passed behind me and muttered, "We can't let you hold your sister back. She's the one who needs to make it." I didn't respond. I stared at the wall. That wall still had Callista's high school dance trophy, her prom queen sash, a framed print from her first brand deal. Nothing of mine. I walked upstairs. My old bedroom was half storage now. Boxes lined the corners, mostly labeled Misk, Holiday, or Callista's old stuff. I crouched near the far wall, where I kept an old shoebox under my dresser. Inside were folded receipts, the car title, insurance documents, the last payment confirmation. Every single page had my name on it. Every dollar came from my account. I sat back on the floor, holding that shoebox like it was the last part of me that made sense. Fury roiled in my chest, hot and controlled. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't betrayal. It was theft disguised as family. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. My mind played through old scenes like a movie reel. When I was 18, my college fund disappeared because Dad had to refinance the house. When I landed an internship in Seattle, my celebration dinner was canceled because Callista had cheerleading finals. No one apologized. They just told me I was so understanding. "You're the strong one. She needs support." For years, that was the mantra. Spoken with affection, as if I should wear it like a badge of honor. All it did was turn me into a ghost in my own home. That night, as the rain finally slowed outside my window, I picked up my phone and opened the Notes app. I typed a new title: Everything They Took. First entry: Honda Civic paid in full. Gone. Second: College fund rerouted. Third: my birthday. I kept going. The first name missing was mine. On the wall, on the bank account, on every family photo that stayed framed. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I told the hospital I had an urgent personal matter. They didn't ask questions after all. I rarely called out. The air outside was wet and bitter, the kind of spring chill that seeped under your sleeves before you could curse it. Instead of coffee, I went straight to the garage. It still smelled like oil and forgotten Christmas decorations. Under the far shelf, in a plastic bin I hadn't touched since I moved back, was the filing box I needed. Inside, every folded paper, every stamped receipt, every signature I'd collected over 5 years of car payments waited patiently to remind me. This was never theirs to take. I pulled out the title, clean and final. Loan payoff confirmation. Purchase invoice. Insurance documents. My name was on every line. I stood there, paper in hand, and something in my chest shifted. The ache from yesterday wasn't gone, it had evolved. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft. Downstairs, Vera was at the stove, flipping eggs like it was any other Tuesday. She didn't glance up as I entered the kitchen, barefoot on cold tile. I laid the car title on the counter beside her coffee mug. You sold something that never belonged to you. She turned the bacon. It was a contribution to the family. My voice didn't rise. Then this family owes a receipt. She scoffed. You're overreacting. It's just a car. You walk to work. I leaned in slightly, just enough for her to hear me over the sizzle. You didn't take my keys. You took my name. She paused, for the first time, like it said something she hadn't scripted for. But it passed. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and walked away, leaving the eggs burning. Later that day, as I sat at the dining table, sorting documents into manila folders, my phone buzzed. FaceTime. Callista. I debated answering, but curiosity won. Her face popped up, glowing from perfect Scottsdale lighting. Hey, birthday girl, I just saw your messages. Wait, they sold your car? I said nothing. She blinked dramatically. That's wild. I thought it was like a shared car. It wasn't, I replied. She paused, gave a pouty look to the camera. Well, if it really means that much to you, I'll give you mine. I can Uber until my next shoot. I smiled. Not because I believed her, but because I finally saw it. How easy it was for her to offer what wasn't hers either. No need. I walk just fine. She laughed like it was a joke, told me she had to go to a poolside networking thing, and the screen went black. Back in my room, I opened my laptop. I started a spreadsheet and named it Assets Paid, Assets Taken. Row 1, 2017 Honda Civic, $21,630. Row 2, iPhone 14 Pro, $1,099. Row 3, birthday, 33rd, 0, zeros, net loss, pride. I scanned each receipt and uploaded PDFs. I photographed the title, the loan closure letter, the maintenance log I'd kept diligently like a badge of adulthood. File name, Wexley Theft, archive.pdf. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. About reclaiming something that had been slowly shaved away over years of being the responsible one. That night, I ate alone again. But I wasn't small. I wasn't invisible. I watched headlights pass through the blinds and thought about how many women like me sat in silence at tables they paid for, next to people who pretended they owed nothing. I stared at the empty driveway. You thought I'd just let it slide. Watch me document every theft in ink. You don't truly notice erasure until you go looking for evidence that you ever mattered. I stopped by the house that morning under the pretense of grabbing a few old files from the hall closet. It was still early quiet enough to make you believe people were kind. I stepped inside without knocking. No one called out, and I didn't call for them either. That kind of familiarity had already faded. As I passed through the living room, something caught my eye, Subtle absence in the family photo wall. There had been a space, right between Callista's prom portrait and a shot of her with a dolphin in Cabo, where my graduation photo used to hang. It was gone. In its place was a glossy, framed photo of Callista parasailing in Mexico, all smiles and sun. Professionally printed, centered, perfectly lit. I stood still for a long minute. Then I made my way to the kitchen. Vera stood at the counter, pouring cereal into a bowl like she was auditioning for a commercial. She didn't look up. She never really did. "Where's my graduation photo?" I asked, voice flat. She didn't pause. It was outdated. The new one adds more color to the wall. My jaw clenched. That photo was mine. She shrugged. "It's not like we threw it away. It's probably in one of the drawers." I nodded, turned, and walked out. No fight, no breakdown. But inside, something moved. Not the raw wound from losing something, but the dull press of knowing it was deliberate. Back at my apartment, I pulled out my phone and opened the shared family photo album. I scrolled. And scrolled. There I was, 2 years ago, smiling beside Callista at Thanksgiving. And then, less. Fewer appearances. Then, none. Photos from family gatherings, where I was holding the camera, but never in front of it. Birthdays I hadn't been invited to. Weddings where my RSVP was pending because no one bothered to ask. It wasn't deletion. It was quiet replacement. A slow fade into the background, like they hoped it'd vanish without complaint. That night, I was folding laundry when Jess texted. Jess had been my friend since high school, the kind of person who never deleted old files or changed her number. "Look what I found." This popped up on my external backup drive. "Remember this?" She sent a link. A video. I tapped it, heart already tight. It was my 26th birthday. I hadn't remembered much of that day until the footage started playing. I stood in front of our family and a few neighbors in the backyard, holding a paper plate of cake. I had just started thanking everyone, voice shaky but trying. Then, before I could finish the second sentence, my father's voice cut in. "Let's save time, Callista just signed a modeling contract. Can we get a round of applause?" The camera turned. Everyone clapped. I vanished off screen. The video ended there. I watched it again. And again. Not out of disbelief, but because something in me needed confirmation. Not just that it had happened, but that I hadn't imagined the pattern. That I had been removed, one story at a time. I opened my Notes app. Footage from 26th birthday. Timeline of dismissal. Confirmed. The next morning, I returned to the house with a framed copy of my college acceptance letter. It was still in the manila envelope from the university, edges curled with age. I stood in front of the family photo wall and, with deliberate calm, placed it next to the parasailing shot. No announcement, no grand gesture, just that. Later that day, Aunt Lenora came by to drop off something. She noticed it immediately. She didn't say a word, just nodded. That was enough. And once I saw how deep the rot went, I knew I couldn't unsee it or pretend it wasn't aimed at me. The first warning came in the form of a declined transaction. I was trying to pay my internet bill, same account I'd always used. Declined. I checked the number again, tried a different card, same message. My stomach didn't drop this time. It hardened. Back home, I logged into my online banking. What I saw wasn't just suspicious, it was surgical. My personal savings had been sliced with quiet precision. Transfers labeled vaguely. Family emergency. Household rebalance. Callista fund. And there, glowing like a slap in my face, was a new joint account listed under Household Langley. My name was tagged as co-owner. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't signed anything. But someone had. That afternoon, I walked into my local branch and asked to speak with a manager. I'd been with this bank since college. They knew me. The woman, polite and pleasant, clicked through the screen. She frowned. "It looks like this account was opened a few months ago, Mom, with your father as primary. He brought a letter authorizing the connection, signed by you." My voice stayed level. "Can I see the letter?" She printed it. The signature at the bottom looked like a child trying to mimic cursive. Not even close. My name bent at odd angles, ink too dark like someone pressed too hard while copying. I thanked her, folded it carefully, and slid it into my leather folder, already full of dates and receipts that proved one thing: this wasn't neglect. It was design. Back at my apartment, the rain had returned, tapping against the windows like a metronome for dread. I pulled up my credit report. There it was. A personal loan. $21,000. Taken out in my name 6 months ago. Auto payments linked to that new joint account had been made consistently, never missed. It looked clean, responsible, like I was building credit. The kind of lie that could pass as truth until you peeled back the page. I stared at the screen for a long time, then picked up my phone and texted Nina, a friend from college who now worked as a paralegal. She replied within minutes. "Come by in the morning." Well, sort it. That evening, I sat on my couch with a yellow legal pad not to vent, but to list. The full scope: $21,000 loan, forged signature for joint account, multiple transfers from personal funds. No consent, no notification. The pen trembled in my hand, but not from fear. From control. I wasn't breaking. I was building something one line item at a time. The next morning, I met Nina in her office downtown. She didn't flinch when I handed her the paperwork. She just nodded. "This is fraud, identity theft technically. But when it's family, it gets complicated." I exhaled. What do I do? First credit freeze, then file an incident report with the Bureau. You can request a forensic signature analysis too. She looked at me. If this were anyone else, Maura, you'd have sued already. I didn't answer. But I was done thinking blood excused betrayal. That night, I sat in bed with a cup of tea and my journal. Not the one I wrote feelings in, the one I used to remember who I was before people tried to edit me. I flipped back to a quote Vera had written in my freshman yearbook: "She's strong. She always figures it out." I wrote beneath it, "Strength is not letting them rewrite your name on a loan you never asked for." The following evening, I showed up for dinner. Same table, same air of passive civility. No one mentioned the account. No one acknowledged the missing money. But when I passed Vera in the hallway, she paused. Her eyes met mine, just for a second. She knew. Harlan said grace that night. I kept my head bowed, but I wasn't praying. I was memorizing the silence. How thick it felt, how much it said. They didn't know what I'd uncovered, but they could feel it in my posture. I wasn't angry anymore. I was prepared. I knew they wouldn't stop, not because they needed to destroy me, but because they needed to keep the version of themselves they sold to everyone else. Vanessa picked the calf. I hadn't seen her in a few years, maybe since her wedding. Downtown Tacoma had its usual buzz brunch crowds, people walking dogs in puffer vests. I arrived early, and she was already there, stirring iced tea and not meeting my eyes. We caught up about nothing. Work, weather, the quality of espresso these days. Then she cleared her throat and said, "I need to tell you something." I waited. "Your parents opened a Macy's credit line under my name. It was about 6 years ago." Everything inside me froze. She rushed to explain. I didn't say anything because I was scared. I got a call from collections, and when I confronted them, they said it was an error. I didn't press charges. I didn't want to cause drama. I felt myself nodding, not because I understood, but because I recognized the pattern. They had used her, too. Vanessa, the girl who once braided my hair before prom. She didn't owe me an apology. I still whispered, "I'm sorry." She gave a small smile. "I figured you didn't know, but maybe it's time you do." Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table with a half glass of wine and a message from Aaron Callistas' ex-boyfriend. He and I had only spoken twice before, but his email was clipped, cold and loaded. Subject: Things you deserve to know. Attached: screenshots of text exchanges between him and Vera, photos of receipts, even an invoice for social media consulting under a fake LLC Vera created to fund Callista's follower growth. The brand deals were fake. They bought followers, bought comments. Everything's been staged since 2020. The kicker? A check written from my name, forged, sent to a dealership to cover Callista's gifted car. Every curated post, every sparkle-infused caption built from my stolen credit. I stared at the screen for a long while. Then I opened a new document. Not legal, not evidence, a letter. I started writing, not to vent, but to clarify. You've built a house of mirrors, and I was the floor you walked on while painting the ceiling gold. Line after line, I dismantled the illusion they had constructed. How my identity had been bartered to buy perfection. I didn't plan to send it, but I printed it, folded it, and added it to my folder. A few days later, I drove to the house. No plan for an ambush. I just wanted to speak, to finally set the record straight. Dinner was over, the table cleared. Vera was folding a napkin when I walked in. "Maura!" she beamed. "You should have told me you were coming. I would have saved you a plate." I placed my folder on the counter. "If you touch another document with my name on it, I will take it to court." Her smile twitched. "This is no longer emotional. It's legal." Harlan entered the room mid-sentence, froze. Callista trailed behind him and stopped in the doorway. No one moved. "I have copies. I have timestamps. Don't make me prove it to people who don't already love you." Vera scoffed. "We made you who you are. Don't forget that." I took a step closer. "If that were true, you wouldn't need to lie about it." I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't raise my voice. That kind of noise always served them more than me. The air outside smelled like salt and leaves. Autumn was coming early. Back at home, I renamed the file on my desktop from Wexley Theft Archive.pdf to Wexley Truth Timeline PDF, because this wasn't just about what they took anymore. It was about what they couldn't erase. That night, I backed up everything to a hard drive, the old one I'd labeled Private Archives in black marker years ago, when I still thought keeping evidence was about self-preservation. This time, it wasn't just backup. It was preparation. I made 2 copies. One I kept in the desk drawer with a coded label. The second went into a fireproof box beneath my bed, alongside the deed to my condo and a sealed letter I hadn't opened in 6 years. I wasn't paranoid. I was precise. The loan rejection came quietly, on a Tuesday. I'd applied for a short professional development course, 6 weeks, online, employer-sponsored. Barely a speed bump in my schedule. It was supposed to be a stepping stone, a simple checkmark on my career roadmap. When the decline email arrived, I blinked. Surely it was a typo, a glitch. Maybe the system didn't process my income verification properly. But no, the denial was real, and so was the reason. I called the credit bureau, expecting a robotic voice. What I got was worse. A calm, almost too kind woman who spoke like she'd read this script 1,000 times. "Your application was denied due to a sudden increase in open accounts and revolving debt," she said. "Would you like me to go over the details with you?" "Yes," I whispered, though part of me already knew. As she read off account after account I hadn't opened, a pit grew in my stomach. "Were you aware of this activity?" "No," I answered, voice flat. "But I know who did it." She didn't respond. Just a pause. Then a muted breath, like she was reminding herself not to get involved. That night, I sat in silence at my dining table, surrounded by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the low buzz of a world that kept spinning while mine quietly tilted. The rejection letter stayed open on my laptop screen, still glowing when the courier knocked. A thick envelope, overnighted, from Nina. Inside, a printed check, scanned and folded. My name typed at the top, my signature at the bottom. But it wasn't my signature. It was an imitation a ghost of my old handwriting, the way I used to sign birthday cards in high school. The curve of the M, the loop on the S so familiar it made my stomach turn. Someone had copied not my style now, but a version of me they still remembered. Or thought they did. The check had paid for a brand new iPhone. Top of the line. The same one Callista had shown off on Instagram last week, with a caption that read, "Milestone Vibes. Thanks, Universe." In the memo line of the check, in a handwriting that clearly wasn't mine. "Happy milestone, darling." I didn't cry. My hands shook a little, But my breath stayed even. I didn't rage. I reached for a pushpin. One pushpin. One more proof. I pinned the check on my corkboard next to the bank transfer printouts, the flagged email from Vanessa about the department store credit card, and a screenshot from my birthday video that had haunted me since January. This wasn't an outburst. This was architecture. I opened my laptop again. No hesitation this time. Subject: cease and desist. Notice of intent body. Effective immediately, you are instructed to reverse all unauthorized use of my name, identity, and financial instruments. Continued violation will result in legal action, both civil and criminal. This is not emotional. It is a matter of law. No salutation, no farewell, just law. I hit send. Then I waited. Not for peace. For pattern. Hours passed. One text arrived, from Vera. "You're overreacting." I didn't reply. I walked to the drawer beside the filing cabinet, pulled out my external hard drive, and connected it. It whirred to life, a slow hum, like the calm before a storm. I began copying everything: financial records, screenshots, PDFs, voice recordings, receipts, statements, even texts I'd screenshotted out of instinct but never thought I'd need. I labeled the new master folder, Wexley Legal Master. Then I made tea, sat on the floor, and turned my living room into a war room. Sticky notes, tabs, highlighters, manila envelopes, color-coded files. I wasn't scared. I wasn't desperate. I was building a timeline. My grandfather Wexley used to say over morning coffee, long before he passed. Some folks only understand truth when it's notarized. The next morning, I got up early and walked to the notary's office on Broadway. No dramatic music, no storm clouds, just the quiet certainty of someone who knows their case is airtight. I presented my ID, signed 3 affidavits, watched the notary seal each document with the clinical grace of someone who's witnessed 100 small wars in ink. When I got home, I renamed the file Wexley v. Langley Exhibit Master. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about getting them to believe me. It was about having the kind of proof no one could edit, manipulate, or gaslight out of existence. This time, I wasn't documenting to be heard. I was documenting to defend. And this time, I wasn't going to lose. I wasn't just preparing a folder, was building a fortress. The message arrived just after midnight, when most decent people are asleep, and the rest are looking for truth. I didn't recognize the name at first, Aunt Ruth. She was my mother's cousin, technically, but always called herself my aunt. Maura, the message read, "I don't know how much you know, but your grandfather left you something and it didn't vanish. It was taken." Attached was a PDF file, the original will. My name was listed clearly, right next to a modest trust fund, set aside for education and first home expenses. Nothing extravagant, just something he believed would help me stand on my own. But it wasn't just the inclusion that caught my attention. It was the version below dated 6 months later. My name had been removed, replaced with Callistus. Ruth's final note read, "They told the family you gave it up. I didn't believe it then. I know better now." By the next morning, I was parked outside Lenora's place. She opened the door without asking why I was there. Her face said she already knew. We didn't sit. She walked to her filing cabinet, pulled out a green folder, and handed it to me. Inside, court paperwork, legal reassignment of the trust, filed by Vera. Grounds, beneficiary mentally unfit to manage finances, estranged from family unit. I stared at the page until the words blurred. "They rewrote my future," I whispered. Lenora's voice was soft but resolute. "But you can still reclaim it." That evening, I sat on the floor of my apartment, timeline folder open like a map of stolen things. I tore a sheet from the back of a notepad and wrote a new cover page. Assets I built. Assets they buried. I added the trust paperwork behind the credit fraud, the forged check, the erased images, the video from my 26th birthday. Then I opened a fresh page and wrote my will. It wasn't long, just enough to name myself. The next day, I walked into the State Financial Bureau with a copy of every document. I waited in line like any citizen. No special treatment. Just a woman carrying a story and the weight of stolen inheritance. The clerk skimmed the file, paused. "This involves your parents?" I didn't flinch. "This involves perpetrators." I signed the statement, left my contact info, and walked out. As the doors swung shut behind me, it didn't feel like closure. It felt like a door slamming on someone else's story. That night, I was folding laundry when I heard the knock. Callista stood on the other side of the door, holding a folder. She looked smaller. Not thinner, not weaker, just less curated. "I didn't know," she said, eyes already brimming. "Mom said it was always mine." I didn't raise my voice. Then ask her to prove it under oath. She didn't argue, didn't cry, just turned and walked away. And for the first time, I didn't wonder if she'd ever come back. Later, I added the new files from Ruth and Lenora to the folder. Then I opened my laptop, turned on the webcam, and hit record. I didn't dress it up, no makeup, no lighting tricks, just me. My words, my version. I named every action, every manipulation, every forgery. I showed documents, read out dates, and ended with a sentence I hadn't rehearsed. This is the version that will remain. That night, I slept for the first time in months. Not like someone victorious, but like someone unburdened. I didn't have to prove I was telling the truth anymore. I didn't have to convince people who had already decided I didn't matter. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't carry the weight of needing to be believed. The group text came the next morning. "Thursday, from Vera. Family brunch this weekend at the house. Let's reconnect, for unity." The word unity made my stomach churn. As if we hadn't just spent the last 6 months buried in legal filings, forged documents, and whispered betrayal. Unity? After a hijacked trust and years of silent sabotage? Still, I didn't delete the message. I didn't respond either. Instead, I opened the file on my desktop financial misconduct, MW.PDF, and printed 5 clean copies. Each was clipped neatly, labeled at the top in bold font. Timeline of financial misconduct, Maura Wexley. I placed them in a folder bag, zipped it shut, and went back to sipping my tea. Sunday came with blue skies and trimmed hedges. The Langley driveway looked like a postcard, every detail curated to perfection. As if the family was trying to put itself back together with landscaping and cinnamon rolls. I pulled in just before noon, parked at the edge, near the mailbox, got out, folder bag in hand, breath steady. The door opened before I knocked. Callista. She looked fragile, puffy eyes, barely their mascara clinging to the outer edges of her lashes like the last survivors of a storm. "Hey," she mumbled, voice thin as tissue paper. I nodded. Didn't slow down. Walked past her and into the home I was raised in, but never really belonged to. Inside, the scent of brunch was thick cinnamon, syrup, and something citrusy. But beneath that was tension. That quiet vibration you can only feel when people are pretending too hard. Vera emerged from the hallway, arms wide like a greeting card. "Look who's come home," she said, voice syrupy and brittle. I didn't hug her. I didn't smile. I stood at the head of the table, still holding the folder bag, watching as relatives drifted into the room, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, an uncle who always found a way to make every holiday uncomfortable, even a neighbor from 3 doors down who'd clearly been promised brunch without being warned about the storm ahead. Harlan leaned near the window, hands shoved into his pockets, pretending to study the rose bushes. Always quiet, always watching. Once everyone settled into their chairs, I unzipped the bag and pulled out the 5 copies. No fanfare, no small talk. I laid them flat on the center of the table, one in front of Vera, one in front of Harlan, one for Callista, and 2 more between the cousins. I stayed standing. "This isn't a confrontation," I said quietly. "It's a correction." You could have heard the ticking of the wall clock. Then Vera blinked, once, twice. Her gaze fell to the title page. Timeline of financial misconduct, Maura Wexley. I opened my copy and began to read. Page by page, line by line, bank transfers, loan applications, notarized forms, dates and amounts, legal footnotes. I didn't authorize this joint account, I said calmly. This is not my signature. This trust was reassigned without my consent. I wasn't theatrical. I didn't need to be. The facts had more weight than fury ever could. Harlan shifted in his chair. One cousin cleared her throat and looked away. Another pulled out their phone and started recording, silently, discreetly, like they knew this would matter later. Halfway through, Vera interrupted. Maura, this is not how we handle things, she said, trying to reassert control. I didn't stop. I picked up a photocopy of a check and held it up. This check, I said, was used to buy Callista's iPhone. Memo line says, "Happy milestone, darling," signed under my name. Callista's jaw dropped. Her fork clattered against her plate. You're saying Mom used your name for that? I met her eyes. For a second, I saw the child I once babysat. The teenager who used to sneak into my room when she was scared of storms. The adult I had tried to protect. I'm saying, I replied. I was erased so someone else could shine brighter. She blinked, tears welling up, but it wasn't defensiveness. It was confusion, pain. Why didn't you tell me any of this? She whispered. I inhaled to answer, but Vera slammed her hand on the table. This is family! We handle things quietly, she snapped, voice sharp. I turned to her, calm and steady. No, I said. You handled me like a secret. Am not one anymore. No shouting, no threats, just truth. I closed the last folder, stacked them together, and slid them back into my bag. Vera stormed upstairs without another word. Harlan followed, quiet as ever, his face unreadable. Callista remained at the table, still, staring down at her uneaten food. I looked around at the others. You're free to believe what you want, I said. But I won't be gaslit into silence again. From now on, I live in facts. Then I turned, walked out the front door, felt the sun hit my face like an apology. Lenora was already parked at the curb. I got into the passenger seat. We didn't say a word as she pulled away from the curb. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of something sacred. A few blocks passed before she spoke. They won't recover from this, she said softly. I stared out the window. Familiar houses blurred past. Neither will I said. But at least I'll recover honestly. The silence after the truth is louder than any screaming match I ever had with them. It's the kind of silence that doesn't seek to be filled. It settles, lingers, and somehow says everything. I woke to the sound of rain tapping gently on my bedroom window. It wasn't a dramatic storm, just that soft, rhythmic drizzle that seems to understand what you're feeling. That kind of rain arrives without warning, stays just long enough, and leaves behind the scent of something washed clean. I stayed in bed longer than usual, eyes tracing the ceiling of my apartment, the place I now called home. It was quiet, safe, mine. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a guest in my own life. The weight I'd carried for decades hadn't disappeared. It had just changed shape. The pressure in my chest, once so sharp and unrelenting, now felt like a memory of pain rather than the pain itself. I didn't feel healed. Not exactly. But I felt air where there used to be suffocation. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even forgetting. It was space, and that space was enough. I brewed a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table in my robe, letting the steam rise up toward my face, like some kind of ritual. No music, no distractions, just the warmth, the quiet, and me. My phone lit up once, a voicemail from a blocked number. I already knew who it was. Vera. I pressed play anyway. Her voice crackled through the speaker, low, rough, not the polished tone she always used in public. Call me, she said. Please just call me. I didn't. That afternoon, my cousin Shelby texted, FYI Vera's been calling everyone, trying to explain her side of things. Apparently, Harlan had taken a leave of absence from work. Stress, someone whispered. Callista had deleted all her social media accounts. Before she did, she posted a single photosome blurry sunset and the caption, "Sometimes love hurts more than lies." I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't want revenge. Just stillness. The kind that comes after a storm has ripped through your backyard, and the tree you always worried would fall finally has, but it didn't crush the house. It just fell. And now there's light where there used to be shadow. The days that followed were quiet. Not empty, not hollow, just different. At work, a group of nurses on my floor noticed I'd dropped weight, that I wasn't speaking as much, wasn't laughing like before. That week, I came back from break to find a birthday card taped to my locker. "We missed the date," it said. "But we see you." It was signed by every hand on the floor. I kept it on my fridge, right above the magnet that read, "Do no harm, but take no crap." My therapist emailed me 2 days later. "You did what many can't. You stood up when it hurt the most. Now let rest do what justice can't." I didn't reply. I just sat with it. Lenora showed up one evening with homemade soup and a yellow sticky note on the lid. "Nothing heals like time and turmeric." She didn't stay long, just hugged me like someone who knew the language of silence. That night, I opened the letter I'd once written to Varatha, one I never sent. I reread it slowly, word by word, tracing my old pain like it was someone else's journal. At the bottom, I added one final sentence. "You taught me how to be invisible, but you also taught me what not to become." Then, I saved the file under a new name, Unsent My Freedom. 2 weeks later, I sat across from a nonprofit attorney in a modest office above a bookstore that smelled like old paper and cinnamon. I asked how I could volunteer specifically for women recovering from identity theft, especially when it came from their own families. She handed me a clipboard of forms, then paused. "You'd be surprised how many come in here with your story," she said softly. "You're not the first, and you won't be the last." That night, I opened a blank document on my laptop and started a blog. Anonymously. I titled it, Daughter Unwritten. I didn't write because I needed followers. I wrote because, for the first time in my life, I felt like my voice didn't echo into emptiness. I wrote to remind myself I wasn't alone in the room anymore. And then, on a quiet Sunday morning, I put on my coat, tucked my hands into the pockets, and walked past my childhood home. A for sale sign was staked in the front lawn, flapping weakly in the wind. No cars in the driveway, no porch lights on, no shouting or laughter spilling from the windows. I didn't approach the door. I didn't need to. I stopped at the edge of the sidewalk and looked at the house I once called mine. Then I whispered, "You took my car." I walked my way out, and I did, without looking back. Sometimes the people who raise us are also the ones who quietly undo us. I spent years mistaking silence for strength and loyalty for love. But strength isn't about how much you can take, it's about knowing when to stop taking it. If you're watching this and feel like your story has been rewritten without your permission, let this be your reminder. You are allowed to take the pen back. You're allowed to draw the line. You're allowed to tell the truth, even when it shakes the very foundation you were taught to protect. In this country, we're raised on the values of family, hard work, and self-respect. But those things don't have to contradict each other. You can protect your peace and still respect where you came from. You can choose boundaries and still believe in reconciliation. And you can walk away and still love yourself. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever had to choose between being accepted and being honest? If this story resonated with you, comment number 1 or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't like the video, tell me why. I want to learn from your experience too. If you want more stories that make you think, feel, and maybe even heal a little, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next one. Because sometimes one voice telling the truth is all it takes to help someone else find theirs.